People say that in the ancient city of Kotor, Montenegro, there lives a weaver whose craft holds a peculiar unsettling power. His rugs are more than mere decoration. They are said to be woven from the threads of fate itself. The woman had heard the whispers, dismissed them as old wives' tales. She had brought home one of the weaver's latest creations, a rich tapestry of deep blues and intricate geometric patterns. As the late afternoon sun slanted across her living room, she knelt to admire it, smoothing a small, raised section with her hand. But then, in her peripheral vision, something moved. A faint grayish smudge flickered, like static on an old television screen. It was gone as quickly as it appeared. The woman blinked, rubbing her eyes. Just tired, she told herself. A trick of the light, perhaps. Yet a strange chill lingered. She glanced back at the rug, her gaze falling on a particularly complex knot of silver and black threads. Then she looked up again, her eyes drawn to the empty wall beside the window. For a fleeting instant, this time, it seemed to mirror the swirling pattern she had just observed on the rug beneath her fingers. A cold, quiet dread began to unfurl within her, just like a loose thread. As she watched, one of the black threads slowly loosened itself from the pattern. The air in the quiet apartment had started to feel heavy, almost viscous. It happened late one night, after the city sounds of Kotor had hushed to a whisper themselves. A soft, almost ethereal murmur drifted through the still rooms, distinctly calling her name. But the voice, it was unmistakable, her deceased mother's. The woman froze, every nerve in her body snapping taut. She looked around the empty living room, her breath catching in her throat. Nothing, just the faint hum of electronics. She shook her head, trying to rationalize it away, blaming exhaustion. But then it returned. Louder this time. "My child," it seemed to sigh, echoing from the hallway, fading into the deeper darkness beyond her bedroom door. For one impossible second she wanted to answer. She wanted to believe her mother was really there. The woman's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drum in the silence. She crept to the doorway, peering into the shadows, empty. The very air felt colder, prickling her skin, despite the mild night. Was she losing her mind? The next morning, her face pale and etched with sleepless anxiety, she sought out her closest friend. "You won't believe what happened," the woman whispered, her voice trembling as she recounted the chilling calls. Her friend listened patiently, eyebrows furrowed, offering gentle, logical explanations. But the woman simply stared, a cold, hard conviction growing inside her. The whispers were real, and they were just beginning. The woman, still shaken by the shifting threads on the rug, needed to escape the living room. Her bedroom, a sanctuary, was just a few steps away. She reached for the familiar brass doorknob, turned it, and pushed the door inward, ready for the quiet solitude within. But the air that met her was stale, thick with the scent of lavender and old cotton. She blinked, her hand still on the knob. This wasn't her bedroom. Shelves laden with neatly folded towels and crisp bedsheets loomed before her. She was standing in the linen closet. A shiver traced her spine. How? Her heart pounded. In the dimly lit space on a pristine white pillowcase, a static gray smudge seemed to momentarily pulse, just like the one that had appeared on the rug. Slamming the closet door shut, she stumbled back. Taking a steadying breath, she tried again. This time, as she pushed the door, her bedroom lay before her, exactly as it should be. But the seamless return offered no comfort. Instead, it planted a chilling seed of doubt. Her home, once a safe haven, was twisting around her. The young woman tried to explain, her voice a frantic whisper. She told her friend how the rooms kept shifting, how the linen closet had appeared in the kitchen, then vanished entirely, replaced by a wall. But her friend just shook his head, a strange, knowing smile playing on his lips. "But you always complain about that," he said, his eyes distant. "Remember, you said the linen closet was always accessible right through your bedroom door, even when you didn't want it to be." A chill snaked up the young woman's spine. That wasn't right. She tried to correct him, but then his words changed, subtly. His tone softened, the cadence of his voice suddenly echoing her own inflections. "It's so annoying," he murmured, almost her words, her intonation, always there, so close. It was as if a piece of her own mind had been lifted and placed inside his, twisting their shared past. His eyes, however, remained his own, calm and dismissing. He believed what he was saying. He believed her false memory. The young woman stared, dread seizing her. It was as if the world itself was unraveling, and now even the people she trusted were becoming threads in a pattern she couldn't understand. That evening, desperate for answers, the woman returned to the weaver's shop. But where the narrow storefront had stood was only a blank stone wall, damp with sea mist. No sign, no door, no weaver. Yet in the mortar between the stones, she could see the same silver-black pattern woven into her rug. The woman's world was shrinking, her sanity fraying at the edges. One morning, the air in her small apartment felt colder than usual, a prickling sensation on her skin. She walked into the kitchen, and there it was, her childhood doll, a relic of comfort, now perched incongruously inside the microwave, its button eyes reflecting the dim light like tiny cold beads. A gasp caught in her throat. No one knew why, but familiar objects were beginning to migrate. The doll had slept beside her through every childhood nightmare. Now it looked like it had come back to watch a new one begin. She carefully took the doll out, placing it gingerly on her old cedar chest, trying to rationalize. Perhaps she'd put it there herself, some unconscious act of a mind under immense strain. But then, as she made her way into the living room, a low moan escaped her lips. High above, almost mocking her efforts, the same doll was now meticulously taped to the center of the vaulted ceiling. Its yarn hair dangled, its tiny stitched smile. She fetched a chair, trembling as she pulled it down, then locked it away in a drawer, securing it with heavy books. That was strange enough. But then, as dawn broke, a soft scratching woke her. Directly above her bed, stuck firmly to the ceiling, was the doll. Its small stitched hand seemed to reach. The entity wasn't just moving things, it was playing a cruel game, making her question her very perceptions. Her home, once a refuge, was becoming a cage. The woman's world began to stutter, like a worn-out reel of film. At first it was subtle, a lost minute here, a skipped conversation there. She'd blink, and the bustling street would suddenly be deserted. Moments, sometimes entire hours, vanishing without a trace. That was strange enough. But then things got worse. Every clock in her apartment began disagreeing with the others. The kitchen clock froze at 3:17. Her phone jumped backward by 7 minutes. The bedside alarm ticked normally for a moment, then spun in reverse with a dry, mechanical click. The woman saw it with her own eyes. She blinked once, and found cold coffee steaming again in her mug, as if the last few minutes had been quietly undone. Profound disorientation became a constant companion, and the whispers, oh, the whispers! They weren't just thoughts. Distorted voices, like echoes trapped in a broken shell, would seep into her mind. They spoke of events that were now impossible, or futures that had been tragically averted. The merchant's reality was no longer a reliable constant. It was a fragmented nightmare, twisting under an invisible, unknowable force, making everything unreliable. The woman stared out the window, expecting the familiar Kotor street. Instead, parched sand stretched to the horizon, a searing, unforgiving sun beating down on endless dunes. A gasp caught in her throat. She rushed to another window, hoping for a trick of light, a cruel illusion. But this one offered no solace. It revealed a churning, stormy sea, monstrous waves crashing against unseen, jagged rocks under a bruised purple sky. Dread, a cold, unyielding fist, seized the woman's chest. She stumbled toward the front door, a desperate need to escape the impossible vistas seizing her. She wrenched it open, only to find herself staring at the perfectly preserved street of her childhood. The old oak tree, the chipped curb, the faded paint on her first home, all there, mocking the present. A sickening lurch filled the air, not quite a sound, more a tremor in the very fabric of existence. The walls themselves began to flicker, a subtle, almost silent static rippling across the plaster, distorting the familiar patterns of her very home was unraveling, becoming something else entirely, a place caught between every memory and nowhere at all. The familiar was now profoundly, terrifyingly wrong, and there was no escape. Drawn back again and again to the place where it all began, the woman found herself standing inside the abandoned weaver's shop. She tried to shut it out, but the suffocating quiet of the abandoned shop only amplified the wrongness, twisting the silence into something malicious. It began with whispers, carried on phantom breezes through empty doorways, always from rooms where no one could possibly be. Then, the woman heard it clearly, a voice, her own voice, speaking from the shadowed corners of the workroom. Not a remembered sound, but a chilling echo of her most private anxieties, doubts she'd never once uttered aloud, fears hidden even from herself, her deepest insecurities, every quiet, shameful thought now externalized, mocking from the very walls. It was relentless, every polished surface, every darkened window pane in the shop, offered a fleeting, distorted glimpse, a twisted reflection of the woman, eyes wide with something unnatural, a mouth contorted in a silent scream that somehow felt her. It was as if her very essence, her sense of self, was being systematically pulled apart, stretched thin, and used against her. The woman began to avoid her own eyes, fearful of what might look back from the silver depths. The silence was now filled with these phantom echoes and vanishing specters, turning the woman's mind into a desolate, inescapable cage. Her identity was no longer her own. It was a plaything in this unsettling, vacant space. The woman stumbled through the cobblestone alleys of Kotor, the ancient stone walls of the city seeming to press in closer with each shuffling step. A strange, heavy dread clung to her clothes, cold and damp. She lifted a hand, a desperate, fumbling gesture, expecting to see her own familiar skin, the familiar lines of her palm, but the limb felt impossibly wrong, like a glove filled with someone else's bones, the knuckles unfamiliar, the fingers either too long or unnaturally short. It was not her hand. A dry, rasping sound tried to escape her throat, a desperate whimper of panic. She caught her reflection in a dusty shop window, a sudden, horrifying glimpse that stopped her breath. It wasn't her face looking back, no face at all, just a shimmering, blurred outline, like an old television screen filled with static, snow swirling endlessly where eyes should have been, a mouth a formless, shifting void. She tried to scream, to call out her own name, to reclaim some last precious piece of who she was, but the sound that tore free was not her. It was a collage of whispers, of strangers' laughter, of the ancient weaver's low, guttural hum, a cacophony of every sound she had ever heard, echoing back from a hollow space where her own voice used to be. The woman stared at the static-filled face in the glass, an empty, nameless horror, and finally understood. There was nothing left inside, only an empty shape, a vessel of echoes, slowly drifting through the city. The woman moved through the impossible house. Her steps were precise, utterly devoid of natural rhythm or hesitation. No fear rippled through her. No surprise registered at the walls that shifted or the floorboards that groaned like living things. Her gaze swept over each impossible angle, every unsettling shadow, as if cataloging data, observing without emotion. It was as if the intricate, terrifying mechanics of the house were simply patterns, recorded without judgment. She saw, but she did not feel. The world was just information. What was once the woman was now an empty, perfect lens. Finally, she stopped in the center of the main room. Her eyes fell upon the rug, the very one that had once been her future. It no longer unraveled. It no longer moved. Instead, it lay perfectly flat, a shimmering, static replica of her own motionless form. Every curve of her silent body, every line of her unblinking face, reflected back from the woven threads with an unnatural, glistening perfection. Not the rug, not the room. She just watched everything. Then, somewhere within the woven reflection, a single thread loosened itself and began stitching the outline of another human figure beside her.